The USB drive around Brooklyn Martinez's neck looked innocent enough, just a small silver pendant on a thin chain that caught the fluorescent light as she walked. What nobody at Westfield High knew was that inside that tiny device lay 15 years of her father's expertise in digital warfare, compressed into a toolkit that could turn any smartphone into a weapon. Brooklyn fingered the pendant as she stood outside the cafeteria doors, watching through the glass at the sea of unfamiliar faces. Lunch period at a new school. The 14th first day of her life. She'd stopped counting after 12. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mom. "First day going okay? Princess, remember what Dad always says?" Brooklyn typed back before the message could finish loading. "Data doesn't lie, people do. I know, Mom." And as she slipped the phone into the pocket of her vintage Nirvana t-shirt, the one with the slightly faded In Utero tour dates on the back. The soft cotton worn thin from years of careful washing. It was the only thing she'd kept from Rachel. The cafeteria doors swung open as another student pushed through, releasing a wave of sound laughter. Conversations, the clatter of trays. Brooklyn took a breath and walked in. She'd learned to read a room within seconds. Survival skill. The popular kids claimed the tables by the windows, their territory marked by letter jackets and designer backpacks. The theater kids clustered near the vending machines, scripts scattered between lunch trays. International students sat together by necessity, more than choice, speaking rapid Korean and Spanish over cafeteria pizza. And there, commanding the center table like a general surveying his troops, sat Caleb Morrison. Brooklyn recognized the type immediately. 6'2", broad shoulders filling out a varsity jacket, blonde hair perfectly styled even after morning practice. The kind of smile that said he'd never been told no and wouldn't know how to handle it if he ever was. His laugh carried across the room, just a decibel too loud, demanding attention. She'd dealt with boys like Caleb at 3 different schools. Sometimes they ignored her. Sometimes they tested boundaries. Sometimes they made her life hell until her parents' orders came through and she disappeared from their world like she'd never existed. Brooklyn found an empty table near the back, pulled out her laptop, and tried to blend into the background. Just another shy transfer student. Nothing interesting here. But Caleb's attention was already fixed on her. "You see the new girl?" His voice carried clearly across the cafeteria. "The one in the hippie shirt." Brooklyn's fingers stilled on her keyboard. She'd heard this song before. Different school. Same lyrics. Trevor, Caleb's second in command, craned his neck to look. "Never seen her before. Probably another military brat. You know how they cycle through here." "Military family, huh?" Caleb's interest sharpened. Brooklyn recognized the tone. Predator spotting prey. Those kids never stay long enough to cause problems. Perfect target practice. Austin laughed the kind of laugh that had nothing to do with humor. "What's the plan, boss?" "Nothing too elaborate. Just a friendly welcome to Westfield High." Brooklyn's training kicked in automatically. She opened what looked like a homework document, but was actually a social media aggregator her father had taught her to build. Within 30 seconds, she had basic profiles on Caleb Morrison, Trevor Banks, Austin Peters, and Mason Scott. Football players, all from affluent families. Caleb's father was the mayor, his uncle the police chief. The Morrison name appeared frequently in local news articles. School board meetings, city council decisions, fundraising galas. A family with deep roots and deeper pockets. Her phone buzzed with a message from her father. "How's the new school? Princess, making friends." Brooklyn typed back, still assessing the landscape. Some concerning power dynamics. Remember, you're stronger than you know. But try to make at least one friend before you graduate. Okay, your mom's worried. If you're feeling that rush of what's going to happen next, hit that like button. It really helps more people discover these stories. And if you want to share where you're watching from, drop it in the comments below. For those who want to support more stories like this one, there's a thanks button right under this video. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps me bring you more inspiring tales of courage and standing up for what's right. Thank you for being here. Now, let's see what happens when push comes to shove. She smiled despite herself. Her parents had given her the tools to fight digital wars, but they still hoped she could navigate high school like a normal teenager. I'll try. Dad, love you. Love you too. Your mom says dinner's at 6. She's making your favorite. Brooklyn closed her phone just as a shadow fell across her table. Well, fresh meat. She looked up to find Caleb Morrison standing over her, his crew flanked out behind him like wolves, up close. He was even more imposing, the kind of physical presence that had probably been intimidating people since middle school. Hi, Brooklyn said quietly. I'm Brooklyn. Brooklyn. Caleb tested the name like he was tasting something bitter. Interesting name. Where you from? Brooklyn. Lots of places. My parents are in the military. Military brat. He said it like a diagnosis. That explains the aesthetic. His eyes swept over her shirt with obvious disdain. Nirvana, weren't they before your time? Brooklyn's hand instinctively went to her collar. It was my friend's. She gave it to me. Trevor picked up on the past tense like a shark, scenting blood. Brooklyn's jaw tightened. She died 2 years ago. Car accident. The table went quiet. For a moment. Brooklyn thought maybe this time would be different. Maybe Caleb would show an ounce of human decency. Instead, he smiled. Well, that's depressing, he said. You know what I think you need cheering up? Don't you guys think Brooklyn needs cheering up? Austin and Mason nodded like bobbleheads. Trevor looked uncomfortable but didn't speak up. See, here's the thing about Westfield High, Caleb continued, leaning against her table. We've got traditions, standards, and showing up to school looking like you raided a thrift store. He shook his head mockingly. That's just not our vibe. Brooklyn felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the same feeling she'd had at Roosevelt High when Brad Patterson had shoved her into a locker. The same feeling at Lincoln Prep when Sarah Chen had spread rumors about her family being on welfare. Different faces, same script. I'm not bothering anyone, she said quietly. Oh, but you are. Caleb's voice dropped lower, more threatening. You're bothering me. See, when someone shows up in my school wearing clothes that belong to dead people, it creates a certain atmosphere, kind of morbid. Don't you think? Several nearby tables had stopped talking. Students were watching now, phones discreetly recording. Brooklyn could feel the familiar weight of being the center of unwanted attention. Maybe you should just go back to wherever you came from, Austin added. Plenty of other schools for military kids. Unfortunately for us, she's stuck here, Mason chimed in. At least until her parents get their next orders. Behind Brooklyn's hands were shaking now, not from fear, from rage. These entitled bullies thought they could push her around because she was new, because she was different, because she didn't have a network of friends to protect her. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Look, she said, standing up slowly. I don't want any trouble. I just want to eat my lunch and… Oh, you want to eat Caleb's grin widened. That's great. You know what I want. I want you to understand how things work around here. Before Brooklyn could react, Caleb reached out and grabbed the front of her shirt. Rachel's shirt, the last piece of her best friend she had left. And he pulled. The sound of fabric tearing cut through the cafeteria noise like a scream. Brooklyn watched in horror as the vintage cotton split down the front, the faded Nirvana logo stretching and distorting before separating completely. Oops, Caleb said, not sounding sorry at all. Looks like your dead friend's shirt was pretty fragile, kind of fitting. Don't you think? The cafeteria erupted. Some students gasped, others laughed, most just stared. Brooklyn stood there in her torn shirt, the fabric hanging in tatters, feeling exposed and humiliated in front of 200 strangers. She should have cried. That's what Caleb expected. That's what would have satisfied him and his crew. Tears, begging, maybe running away to hide in the bathroom until the bell rang. Instead, Brooklyn pulled out her phone. What are you gonna do? Caleb taunted. Call your mommy. Take a selfie for your blog. Brooklyn didn't answer. Her fingers moved across the screen with practiced precision. Muscle memory built from years of her father's training. She opened an app that looked like a basic calculator, but was actually a network penetration tool. 15 seconds. That's all she needed. The app activated, sending out invisible tendrils through the school's Wi-Fi network. Every phone within 30 feet became a potential target. The cafeteria's wireless speakers, the security cameras, even the cash registers in the lunch line. Caleb was still talking, making jokes about dead friends and charity clothes, but Brooklyn wasn't listening anymore. She was watching her screen as device after device fell under her control. Caleb's phone, accessed. Trevor's phone, accessed. Austin's phone, accessed. Mason's phone, accessed. Text message, histories downloading. Photo galleries cloning. App data copying. Financial records syncing. All of it flowing into the USB drive around her neck. You done playing with your phone? Caleb asked mockingly. Because I'm not done with you yet. Brooklyn looked up at him, her expression calm for the first time since he'd approached her table. Actually, she said, her voice steady and clear, I think we're done here. She turned to walk away, leaving her torn shirt on the cafeteria floor like a discarded banner of war. But Caleb wasn't ready to let her go. Hey. He grabbed her shoulder, spinning her around. I'm talking to you, and I'm done listening, Brooklyn replied. The cafeteria had gone completely silent now. Even the lunch staff had stopped serving to watch the confrontation. Caleb's face flushed red. Nobody talked to him like that. Not at his school, not in his cafeteria, not in front of his audience. You think you're tough, he snarled. You think because you're some military brat you can just… I think, Brooklyn interrupted, that you should check your phone. What? Check your phone, Caleb. I think you'll find it interesting. Confused and annoyed, Caleb pulled out his iPhone. The screen was black. He pressed the home button. Nothing happened. What did you do to my phone? He demanded. Brooklyn smiled for the first time all day. I showed it the same respect you showed my shirt. You can't just break someone's phone. That's destruction of property. I didn't break anything, Brooklyn said. I just borrowed some information. For example, did you know your phone automatically backs up your text messages to the cloud, even the ones you think you deleted? Caleb's face went pale. See, the thing about digital forensics, Brooklyn continued. her voice carrying clearly across the silent cafeteria, is that everything leaves a trace. Every message, every photo, every transaction, every secret you thought you buried. She looked around at his crew, watching their confident smirks fade into uncertainty. Trevor, you might want to check your betting app. Those transactions to Mason's dad's construction company are pretty interesting, especially since his dad's business has been closed for 6 months. Trevor's hands shook as he grabbed his phone. Austin, those photos in your insurance folder, the ones of other students in compromising situations, those could be considered harassment, maybe even blackmail, depending on what you've done with them. Austin tried to unlock his phone. The screen flashed red, access denied. And Mason, well, let's just say your PayPal history tells a fascinating story about grade changes and answer keys. The cafeteria was dead silent now. Brooklyn looked back at Caleb, whose face had gone from red to ashen gray. But you, Caleb, you're the most interesting of all. See, when I accessed your phone, I didn't just find text messages. I found financial records, betting accounts, wire transfers, a whole network of activities. You're lying, Caleb whispered. Brooklyn pulled out her own phone, tapping the screen once. Suddenly, Caleb's voice filled the cafeteria through the sound system. Look, I don't care if the kid gets hurt. He's not paying what he owes. And that affects all of us. Make an example. The recording continued. My uncle will handle any police reports. Dad's got the school board locked down. We own this place. Brooklyn tapped her screen again. The audio stopped. That was from last Tuesday, she said conversationally. Right around the time Marcus Rodriguez ended up in the hospital with those random injuries. Interesting coincidence, don't you think? The cafeteria erupted in chaos. Students were grabbing their phones, backing away from Caleb's table, whispering frantically to each other. Someone was crying. Others were laughing in shock and disbelief. Caleb lunged at Brooklyn, his face twisted with rage. But Trevor grabbed his arm. Don't, Trevor hissed. Don't make it worse. Worse? Caleb snarled. How could this possibly be worse? Brooklyn tilted her head thoughtfully. Well, I suppose it could be worse if someone had accidentally sent copies of all this information to, let's see. She pretended to check her phone. The school administration, the police department, the local news station, and oh, what's this, the FBI field office in Richmond? The color drained completely from Caleb's face. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice cracked on the words. Brooklyn shrugged. Maybe, or maybe I'm my father's daughter, and he taught me that the best defense against bullies is a good offense. She looked around the cafeteria one more time, her eyes meeting those of students who had watched her humiliation and done nothing. You know what the funny thing is, she said, her voice carrying clearly in the stunned silence. All of this started because you couldn't handle seeing someone different walk into your cafeteria. Because you thought tearing apart a dead girl's shirt would make you feel powerful. She picked up the torn fabric from the floor, holding it carefully. But here's what you didn't understand. Caleb, that shirt wasn't just fabric. It was a memory. It was the last piece of the only person who ever truly understood me. And when you destroyed it, you didn't just attack me. Brooklyn's voice grew stronger, more certain. You attacked every kid who's ever felt like an outsider. Every student who's been pushed around by people like you. Every person who's ever been told they don't belong. She looked directly at him, her eyes blazing with quiet fury. And that was the biggest mistake you'll ever make. The cafeteria doors burst open as Principal Harrison rushed in, followed by 2 security guards and what looked like half the school faculty. "What is going on here?" Principal Harrison demanded. Brooklyn calmly walked over to him, still holding the torn shirt. "Principal Harrison, my name is Brooklyn Martinez. I'm a new student, and I need to report several crimes that have just come to my attention." She handed him her phone, showing a screen full of evidence, financial records, communications, photos, audio files. "I believe you'll want to call the police, and possibly the FBI. This is going to require federal jurisdiction." As the principal's face went white, reading her phone, Brooklyn felt the familiar buzz of her own device. A text from her father. "Everything okay, Princess? My security alerts are going crazy." Brooklyn typed back, "Everything's perfect. Dad, I think I'm finally going to fit in here." She looked around the cafeteria one more time at the shocked faces, the recording phones, the chaos she'd created in less than 5 minutes. At Caleb Morrison, son of the mayor, nephew of the police chief, golden boy of Westfield High, now staring at his phone like it might explode in his hands. For the first time in 14 schools, Brooklyn Martinez felt like she was exactly where she belonged. If this story reminds you of someone you knew in high school, someone who stood alone while others watched, maybe it's time to ask yourself, what would you do if you had the power to fight back? The bell was about to ring. Lunch period was almost over. But Brooklyn's real education was just beginning, and Caleb Morrison's world was about to discover that sometimes the quiet kid in the corner is the most dangerous person in the room. Little did anyone know. This was only the beginning. What Brooklyn had uncovered in those 15 seconds would shake Westfield High and the entire town to its very foundation. The FBI arrived at Westfield High exactly 47 minutes after Brooklyn handed Principal Harrison her phone. She knew because she'd been counting, watching the second hand on the cafeteria clock while chaos erupted around her. Agent Sarah Thompson walked in like she owned the place, which, Brooklyn supposed, she technically did now that this had become a federal case. Tall, sharp-eyed, wearing a navy blazer that probably cost more than most students' entire wardrobes. She surveyed the scene with the practiced calm of someone who'd seen much worse than high school drama. "Brooklyn Martinez!" Agent Thompson's voice cut through the nervous chatter of students and faculty. "Yes, ma'am?" "I'm Agent Thompson. Your mother speaks about you often." Brooklyn blinked in surprise. "You know my mom. Maria Martinez is one of the best digital forensics analysts in the Bureau. She's been mentoring me for 3 years." Agent Thompson's expression softened slightly. "She's going to be very proud when she hears about this." Principal Harrison approached nervously, still clutching Brooklyn's phone like it might bite him. "Agent Thompson, I'm not sure what exactly—" "Principal Harrison." Agent Thompson's attention snapped to him with laser focus. "I'm going to need to interview you, along with your entire administrative staff, your IT department, and anyone who's had access to your network systems in the past 2 years. 2 years, Harrison's voice cracked. "Surely this is just a student prank that got out of hand." "Mr. Harrison," Agent Thompson's voice carried the weight of federal authority. "What Miss Martinez has uncovered here appears to be a sophisticated racketeering operation involving money laundering, extortion, academic fraud, and conspiracy. This isn't a prank. This is organized crime." The color drained from Harrison's face as the implications hit him. Brooklyn watched the exchange with professional interest. She'd seen her parents work cases before, knew the signs when a simple investigation was about to become something much bigger. Brooklyn, Agent Thompson continued. I'm going to need you to walk me through exactly what you found and how you found it. But first, she looked around the cafeteria, where students were still recording everything on their phones. Let's find somewhere more private. 20 minutes later, Brooklyn sat in Principal Harrison's office, her laptop connected to a secure FBI workstation, walking Agent Thompson through the digital evidence she'd gathered. This is remarkable work, Agent Thompson said, scrolling through financial records that showed money flowing between dozens of accounts. How long did this take you to compile? About 15 minutes during lunch, Brooklyn replied. But I've been refining the search algorithms for months. My dad's been teaching me advanced penetration testing since I was 12. Agent Thompson paused. 15 minutes, Brooklyn. This represents thousands of hours of investigative work. You've documented a criminal network that we've been trying to map for months. You've been investigating Westfield High. We've been investigating unusual financial activity in this county. Large cash deposits, suspicious wire transfers, academic records that don't match standardized test scores. But we couldn't establish the connection between all the moving pieces. Agent Thompson leaned back in her chair. You just handed us the missing puzzle pieces. A knock at the door interrupted them. A man in his 40s peered in nervously, thin, wearing a Westfield High IT department polo shirt. Excuse me, Agent Thompson, I'm Carlos Rodriguez, the school's IT administrator. I think I might have information that could help. Brooklyn recognized him immediately, the quiet man she'd seen monitoring network traffic. Always staying late. Always looking worried. Please, come in, Mr. Rodriguez. Carlos entered hesitantly, carrying an external hard drive and a stack of printed documents. I've been documenting security breaches and unauthorized access attempts for over a year. I tried to report it to administration. But he glanced nervously at Principal Harrison. But what? Mr. Rodriguez, Agent Thompson prompted. But every time I filed a report, it disappeared from the system. When I asked about it, I was told to focus on my job and stop looking for problems where none existed. Brooklyn felt a chill of recognition. They were threatening you? Carlos nodded. Not directly, but my wife's visa renewal application got delayed right after I submitted my first report. My son's college scholarship suddenly required additional review. Small things, but the message was clear. Agent Thompson's expression hardened. What kind of breaches were you documenting? Grade changes that didn't come through proper channels. Financial aid records being altered. Disciplinary reports being deleted. Carlos plugged in his hard drive. And then there was the betting. Betting, someone was using the school's network to run gambling operations, sports betting, mostly, but also academic bets, which students would get suspended, which teachers would get fired, even which families would move away. His voice dropped. They were betting on real people's lives. Brooklyn leaned forward. The financial records I found showed payments to something called Educational Consulting Services. That's the front company, Carlos confirmed. But the real money was flowing through the Booster Club accounts. They'd take bets, manipulate game outcomes or academic results, then pay out through scholarship funds and athletic equipment purchases. Agent Thompson was typing rapidly on her laptop. Mr. Rodriguez, are you willing to testify about what you've observed? Yes, ma'am. I've been waiting for someone to take this seriously. And Brooklyn, I'm going to need copies of everything on your phone and that drive. Can your father help us verify the chain of custody for digital evidence? He's actually flying in tonight, Brooklyn said. Mom called him after she heard from you. For the first time all day, Brooklyn felt a smile tugging at her lips. Her parents had always supported her, but knowing they were dropping everything to help her fight this battle meant everything. Excellent. Now, there's something else we need to discuss. Agent Thompson's expression grew more serious. Brooklyn, you've exposed a criminal network that's been operating for years. These people have significant resources and political connections. You could be in danger. As if summoned by her words, Principal Harrison's secretary knocked urgently on the door. Agent Thompson, there are several men here from the police department. They say they need to speak with the student who's been making false accusations against prominent community members. Through the office window, Brooklyn could see 3 police officers in the hallway, led by a man in a crisp uniform with silver stars on his collar. Even without seeing his nameplate, she knew who he was. Chief Morrison, Caleb's uncle. Interesting timing, Agent Thompson murmured. She stood, her hand resting casually on her weapon. Mr. Harrison, please ask Chief Morrison to wait. Brooklyn, don't say anything without a lawyer present. But Brooklyn was already one step ahead. While the adults had been talking, she'd been monitoring social media, news feeds, and police communications through her phone. The Morrison family was in full damage control mode. Agent Thompson, she said quietly, you should know that Mayor Morrison called an emergency city council meeting 15 minutes ago. The agenda item is listed as addressing false allegations against city officials. They're trying to get ahead of the story, Agent Thompson realized. More than that. Brooklyn showed her the screen. Look at the timing. The police department issued a press release 30 minutes ago claiming that a disgruntled student had made unfounded cyber attacks against respected community members. They're spinning this as if I'm the criminal. Agent Thompson's jaw tightened. They're trying to discredit you before the evidence goes public. But here's the thing they don't know, Brooklyn continued. I wasn't just collecting evidence during lunch. I was also documenting their response to being exposed. Every phone call, every text message, every panicked conversation they've had since this started. She pulled up another screen, showing real-time communications between Mayor Morrison, Chief Morrison, several school board members, and what appeared to be a crisis management firm in Washington, D.C. They're not just trying to cover up the betting and academic fraud, Brooklyn said. They're coordinating a full-scale character assassination campaign against me, and they're involving people way outside Westfield to do it. Agent Thompson stared at the screen. Brooklyn, this is beyond what most federal agents could accomplish with months of wiretaps and surveillance warrants. My dad always said the best time to gather intelligence is when your targets think they're safe. They're making calls on unsecured lines because they think a 17-year-old girl couldn't possibly be listening. The office door opened without a knock. Chief Morrison walked in, his presence filling the small space, followed by 2 officers Brooklyn didn't recognize. Agent Thompson, he said with false courtesy, I think there's been a misunderstanding here. I don't believe there has been. Chief Morrison, this young lady has been spreading malicious rumors about my nephew and several other fine young men. We have reason to believe she's engaged in illegal hacking activities. Agent Thompson stood slowly. And what reason would that be? Well, obviously she couldn't have accessed private information without breaking the law. She's admitted to compromising student phones, which is a clear violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Brooklyn felt her heart sink. Chief Morrison was right, technically, What she'd done could be considered illegal, even if it was in self-defense. But Agent Thompson smiled coldly. "Chief Morrison, are you familiar with the federal whistleblower protections for reporting financial crimes? This isn't whistleblowing, it is." Agent Thompson pulled out her phone, scrolling through a document. "The information Miss Martinez provided has helped us identify violations of the Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, the Money Laundering Control Act, and the Educational Financial Aid Fraud Act, under federal law. Any actions she took to document these crimes are protected." Chief Morrison's confident expression wavered. "Furthermore," Agent Thompson continued, "we've verified her information through independent sources. Mr. Rodriguez here has been documenting the same criminal activity for over a year, and our forensic accountants have confirmed the financial irregularities she identified." "Now wait just a minute." "No, Chief Morrison, you wait." Agent Thompson stepped closer. "Because what I'm really curious about is how you knew to come here so quickly. How did you know about Miss Martinez's discoveries? Because, according to our timeline, the only people who knew about this investigation were in this room." The silence stretched uncomfortably. Brooklyn watched Chief Morrison's face, saw the exact moment he realized he'd walked into a trap. "Unless," Agent Thompson continued thoughtfully, "you've been monitoring communications related to this criminal network, which would make you not just aware of the crimes, but potentially complicit in them." "I want a lawyer," Chief Morrison said suddenly. "I think that's an excellent idea. Officer Williams." Agent Thompson nodded to one of the FBI agents who had appeared in the doorway. "Please read Chief Morrison his rights." As the FBI agent began reciting the Miranda warning, Brooklyn felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because justice was finally being served. Sadness because she'd seen this pattern too many times. Adults who were supposed to protect students instead protecting their own interests. Her phone buzzed with a text from Isabella Chen. "News crews are setting up outside. Whatever you did, it's about to go national." Brooklyn looked out the window. Sure enough, satellite trucks from 3 different news stations were parked on the street, reporters checking their equipment, preparing for the story that would define Westfield High for years to come. Another text, this one from a number she didn't recognize. "You think you're safe because the FBI is here? You have no idea who you're dealing with. Watch your back." Brooklyn showed the message to Agent Thompson, who immediately had it traced and documented as evidence of witness intimidation. "Brooklyn," Agent Thompson said, "I think it's time we got you somewhere secure while we sort this out." But Brooklyn shook her head. "No, I'm not running away anymore. This isn't running away. This is being smart. Agent Thompson, I've been moving from school to school my whole life, always leaving before I could make a real difference, but this time is different." Brooklyn looked out at the news trucks, the gathering crowd, the chaos she'd created with 15 seconds of digital rebellion. "This time, I'm not going anywhere until it's finished." 3 hours later, Brooklyn stood in the Westfield High auditorium, facing a packed crowd of students, parents, faculty, and reporters. Agent Thompson had tried to talk her out of it, but Brooklyn insisted on making a public statement. She'd changed clothes, traded her torn Nirvana shirt for a simple black sweater her mother had brought from home. But around her neck, she still wore the USB drive that had started it all. "My name is Brooklyn Martinez," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. 2 months ago, I enrolled at Westfield High as a transfer student. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to make friends or join clubs or go to dances. I just wanted to graduate and move on. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces, some supportive, some skeptical, some openly hostile. But then Caleb Morrison decided that I didn't belong here. He decided that my clothes, my background, my very presence in his cafeteria was somehow threatening to him. So he destroyed something that meant everything to me, thinking it would make me disappear. Brooklyn pulled the torn pieces of Rachel's shirt from her bag, holding them up for everyone to see. This shirt belonged to my best friend Rachel, who died 2 years ago. It was the last thing I had of her, when Caleb tore it apart. He didn't just attack me, he attacked her memory. He attacked every student who's ever felt different or alone or like they didn't belong. The auditorium was completely silent, so I used the skills my parents taught me to defend myself. And what I found was bigger than bullying, bigger than high school drama. I found a criminal network that was stealing from students, manipulating grades, running illegal gambling operations, and threatening anyone who tried to stop them. She looked directly at the section where the Morrison family sat, their faces pale and strained. I found adults who were supposed to protect students, instead protecting their own power. I found teachers who were supposed to educate students, instead exploiting them. I found officials who were supposed to serve the community, instead serving themselves. Brooklyn's voice grew stronger, more passionate. But I also found something else. I found students who were brave enough to speak up when it mattered. I found teachers like Mr. Rodriguez who documented crimes even when they were threatened. I found investigators like Agent Thompson who were willing to follow the evidence wherever it led. She paused, pulling up her phone one final time. And I found out that when you fight back, when you refuse to be silenced or intimidated or pushed around, you discover you're not alone. You're part of something bigger than yourself. Brooklyn looked around the auditorium, her eyes settling on faces she was beginning to recognize: Isabella Chen with her camera and notebook, Carlos Rodriguez in his IT polo shirt, students who had watched her humiliation in the cafeteria and were now seeing its aftermath. Tomorrow, Westfield High starts over. New administration, new policies, new accountability measures, and I'm starting a program called Digital Defenders, teaching students how to protect themselves online, how to gather evidence of cyberbullying and digital harassment, and how to use technology as a force for justice instead of oppression. The auditorium erupted in applause, but Brooklyn wasn't finished. Because here's what I learned today. The internet doesn't forget. People lie. But data tells the truth. And when you combine digital tools with moral courage, you can change the world. She held up the torn shirt one final time. Rachel, this is for you, and for every student who's ever felt like they didn't belong. You belong. You matter. And you're not alone. 6 months later, Brooklyn Martinez walked across the Westfield High graduation stage to receive her diploma. In the audience, her parents cheered alongside Agent Thompson, Mr. Rodriguez, and Isabella Chen, who was now working as a stringer for the Washington Post. The Digital Defenders program had been adopted by school districts across Virginia and was being considered for national implementation. Brooklyn's testimony had led to 17 indictments, including Mayor Morrison, Chief Morrison, and 3 school board members. Caleb Morrison was serving 2 years in juvenile detention for racketeering and conspiracy charges. His father had resigned in disgrace. His uncle was awaiting trial on federal corruption charges. But Brooklyn's greatest victory wasn't measured in convictions or media coverage. It was measured in the students who now felt safe to report bullying, in the digital literacy classes that taught kids how to protect themselves online, in the policy changes that gave students a voice in their own education, and in the new Nirvana t-shirt she wore under her graduation gown, not a replacement for Rachel's memory, but a celebration of moving forward while honoring the past. As she walked off the stage, diploma in hand, Brooklyn fingered the USB drive around her neck and smiled. For the first time in her life, she was exactly where she belonged. The digital revolution in education had begun, and Brooklyn Martinez was leading the charge, one school, one student, one act of courage at a time. Sometimes the quiet kid in the corner really is the most dangerous person in the room. But dangerous doesn't always mean destructive. Sometimes it means transformative. Sometimes it means hope. 3 years later, Brooklyn stood in her dorm room at MIT, unpacking boxes for her freshman year in cybersecurity engineering. On her desk, she placed a framed photo from Westfield High's first annual Digital Defenders graduation ceremony, dozens of students holding certificates in digital ethics and cyber safety. Her phone buzzed, a message from Isabella Chen, now a freshman at Columbia Journalism School. Just saw the news. The Morrison case precedent was cited in a Supreme Court decision about student digital rights. We actually changed constitutional law. Brooklyn. Another message. From Agent Thompson. The Digital Defenders program just got federal funding. They want you to consult on the national rollout. Interested? Brooklyn smiled, touching the USB drive she still wore around her neck. Some battles you fight to survive. Others you fight to ensure no one else has to face what you did. She typed back, absolutely. When do we start? Outside her window, Cambridge bustled with new students finding their way. Brooklyn Martinez had finally found hers. The quiet girl who refused to stay quiet had found her voice and taught a generation to find theirs.